Thank you so much for joining the Partner Spotlight webinar with Meridian and Netgain. We are a minute past the hour, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. We'll still let others jump in and join. But JT with Meridian Business, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Good morning, everyone. As Jenny said, I'm JT Bell. I'm on our sales and marketing team here with Meridian. We really appreciate everyone being here today for Meridian's Partner Spotlight webinar. This webinar is part of Meridian's continued Spotlight webinar series, where we highlight one of our key partners that helps us bring NetSuite to market. So before I introduce Andy and Netgain, I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge the Breakthrough Solution Partner of the Year award that the Meridian team won at the Suite World Conference this past October. This award is given to one solution partner each year, and it's an exciting milestone for our team, and I think a great testament to the great work that our team does for our NetSuite clients on a consistent basis. Today, we're excited to feature Netgain, as I said, a leader in the NetSuite space, helping accounting and finance teams with automating their financial close process, lease accounting, asset management, and all that good stuff, which I'll let Andy get into. But she'll be sharing insights on how Netgain and Meridian can drastically improve your instance specifically through their services tailored specifically to NetSuite. So before we dive in, I did want to give a little background on Meridian overall for those of you who might not be familiar with who we are or what exactly it is that we do. So Meridian is a certified NetSuite solution partner provider. We specialize in selling, implementing, and providing ongoing managed services support for current and existing NetSuite users. Our team also handles business development, process consulting, full implementation services, etc. In addition to NetSuite, we work with various partner solutions like Netgain, helping to extend or modify business processes as NetSuite evolves. Our Meridian team also holds level 4 certifications with Sligo and additional certifications with multiple partners, enabling us to deliver enhanced flexibility in integrating and automating your workflows within NetSuite. So NetSuite is powerful, but no system can do everything, which is why we spotlight our partners like Netgain on a monthly basis that complement and enhance its capabilities. So Andy, with that, I'll let you take it over and share more about Netgain.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Moving to our agenda here, just kind of a quick rundown of where we're headed. Quick introduction, as mentioned, my name's Andy Lampert. I am a partner relationship manager here for Netgain, which just is kind of a fancy title, meaning I get to work really close with our partners like Meridian, kind of help enable on the products, do, product overviews like today. My background, I am a CPA. I started in public accounting here in Denver. I was an auditor for 3 years and then transitioned into more of a consulting role for 2 years, where I saw a whole host of different stuff from month-end close to setting up, accounts payable team, even into technical accounting topics like rev rec, lease accounting. So have seen a lot of different kind of viewpoints of the accounting process, and then I've been at Netgain for just shy of 4 years. So I'm super excited to be here, spend some time with everyone today. We'll do a quick overview of Netgain in case this is the first time folks have heard of us. And then my plan is to focus on our net lease and net asset tools. That being said, if anyone has any other questions or there's products that are piquing our interest, with time, I'm happy to kind of pop into those. But that will be mostly the focus today, with obviously an overview of everything we do. So before we get into the products, as mentioned, I like to touch a little bit on who Netgain is and why we exist. So on our side, we like to, tell ourselves and make sure we're really living the values of creating this renaissance of accounting. What's really unique about Netgain is a lot of us are CPAs or have worked in public accounting or even private as controllers. And so we really understand that there is a lot of power in what we're doing, but we want to take accountants out of maybe their day-to-day roles of just closing the books and make sure they're really helping steer the company. And so how we believe we do that is by creating the right tools where teams can stop spending time on really manual work and start spending time on those areas where we're providing insights that actually matter to leadership. So how we do that, we build suite apps directly within NetSuite. So everything we look at today will be built directly within NetSuite. It's no syncing, no leaving the platform and then coming back in. Everything is right within your toolbar. So you'll see that here in a little bit. And our goal is simple. We really want to automate the mundane, stay compliant with whatever your reporting requirements are, and make sure that you're getting accurate financials as easy and fast as possible. So how we do that in part, there we go. As I mentioned, is we do build native suite apps. So what that means, fully internal, nothing is living outside NetSuite. We're not pushing any data. Obviously, there's kind of 3 different buckets that applications will fall into as you are looking throughout the ecosystem. So either an integrated, hybrid, or native option, and we will live in that rightmost column here of the native application. So not only does that mean we're not creating any additional users, we're also making sure that we're leveraging the platform itself. So when it comes to security, all of that kind of goes back to that native NetSuite that you probably looked at as you were purchasing NetSuite. So we're not recreating the wheel, making sure it's very comfortable. There's no learning curve as far as how does this work? It's going to feel really, really natural for you. So here's a look at kind of everything we touch as far as products. As I mentioned, we'll kind of get into lease and asset more in depth here. We'll actually dive into a demo, but we also have our net close tool. So this is going to be our month-end optimization tool. So as you're looking to close the books, as you're maybe managing different reconciliations, flux analysis, different task management, all of that is going to be captured under our net close tool. So we believe that the close really does belong in your NetSuite environment. So this is a really good option if maybe you are evaluating things like a blackline, or you're looking to move off a blackline or a flowcast. NetClose would be a really good option to throw as you're evaluating. Cross-validation rules, this is one of our newer tools and one that's really taking the ecosystem by excitement. So this is going to help us prevent those GL errors at the source. So whether you have maybe some sort of account combination with segments that you require, or you want to stop people from posting different things, that's going to help us here to set those up at the source versus it being a month-end activity of, hey, do all of our P&L accounts have a department? We can set up those rules really, really easily. So if I go in and I make a journal entry and I forget my department, I'll get, hey, you need a department here. So you can either flag it saying, this is required, or we'll even stop it at the source saying, hey, you can't post this without whatever that requirement is. Our net cash tool is going to be our bank reconciliation tool. So this is going to allow us to auto create deposits and checks. And it's also going to speed up our bank reconciliation process. So we have really easy to use rules that we can set up. Bank fees is a really good example. Maybe every month we forget to make our bank fee journal entry and we only catch it at the end of the bank reconciliation process. We can actually start creating rules like, hey, if you see this activity in our bank statement, I want you to create a journal entry. And then we can start doing auto matching type activities as the system grows smarter and smarter. And then that kind of pulls us into our advanced cash reporting. So obviously a reconciliation report, but also cash flow reports, making sure that we're building those out so you're not spending a lot of time in Excel on those. Next is our shared transaction tool. So this is our allocation tool. If you have a need to allocate different journals or bills or really any type of source transaction across subsidiaries, we're able to go into that source transaction and allocate it out. This is going to help us speed up intercompany transactions. We also can support arm's length transactions, which is kind of a newer offering with this tool, or enhanced offering. So if you have maybe a parent paying on behalf of a subsidiary and you really need to show an invoice for that transaction, we now can support that as well. On our kind of more operational side, we also have a punch out tool. So if folks have needs within the procurement sector of your company, thinking things like Amazon Business, maybe Grainger, Staples, anything where high volume procurement where you're trying to bring that into NetSuite and make it a little bit easier, creating the POs, etc., we can also support that. This list is obviously pretty limited. We do connect with a whole host of different vendors. So if you're curious if your vendor would qualify, I'm always happy to kind of take a look at that. And we can see if we have previously connected to those vendors or not. So a lot on this page. Obviously, today is going to be net lease and net asset. But if any of these other products kind of pique interest, as I mentioned, feel free to drop a note in the chat. And if we have time today, we can poke around. So moving into NetLease. So this really was our first product that we came to market with. So we consider it our flagship product. It's been out on the market for about 8 years now. And the real reason we created this is our co-founder saw a gap in the ecosystem. We saw that FAM was going to kind of try to handle leases, but we saw a huge opportunity when auditors were going to start digging into our leases with things like audit requirements and disclosures. And so our co-founders kind of stepped back out of NetSuite itself and created Netgain to bring NetLease to the market. So the reason we built this, as I mentioned, we recognized that lease accounting was a real headache. This was a huge change. We were seeing a lot of folks in spreadsheets. We were seeing a lot of folks not even really understanding what 842 or IFRS 16 was bringing to the table. And so we created NetLease to make this as easy as possible. And so you aren't relying on maybe technical accounting support like you had in the past, bringing that within NetSuite and making this something that an everyday user can use. So it's going to automate our calculations of the lease liability. We can handle any like modifications, terminations, all of that right within the tool and within our schedule, which I will show you guys here in a little bit. Next was our net asset tool. So I always like to joke that we did so well on NetLease. Folks were like, hey, can you please bring this to asset accounting? This really would be so good to see. And so this was the second product we brought to market. In my past role as a consultant, I had spent a lot of time within the FAM module trying to manage different assets as we were building up, office space, trying to control all of my construction in progress, allocate it out to assets. And when I came to Netgain, I kid you not, I was like, how did I not know about this earlier? I would have been so much more powerful as a consultant had I known about net asset, because it literally took away every issue I was trying to solve within NetSuite at the time. So the reasons that folks start to kind of talk to us about net asset, whether they're evaluating FAM, they're already on FAM, maybe they're just working in Excel spreadsheets and they're transitioning into NetSuite, our number one is going to be high volume assets. And you're going to say, what the heck will qualify as a high volume? And it's a couple hundred. So whether we see folks kind of in the 200-300 up past 500 assets, that's going to throw you kind of into the higher volume asset where FAM is going to be able to handle that. The second is going to be our native reports. So if you have things like roll forward reports, waterfall reports that a lot of times you're manually creating, those are all going to come out of the box. We have 39 pre-built reports that are a part of net asset. And then the second is going to be the third is going to be kind of our like construction in progress and build up opportunities. So we can keep adding costs to our assets very easily without having that like manual effort. And so I will show you how that works. But the bottom line here, again, like NetLease, we're just trying to get folks to spend less time in spreadsheets. We want to make sure we're automating those reports. So whether it's month-end close or you're in your audit season, you have everything you need at the tip of your fingers to provide and support those balances. A common question we obviously get all the time is going to be, whether you have FAM or you're evaluating is, why would I pay for net asset versus this tool that comes with my NetSuite or maybe is bundled with my NetSuite. And so we have put together this one pager, and I'm happy to share this with folks if this resonates with you. And this kind of just walks through those three top items that I just talked about. So construction in progress, we have a true CIP process where we can propose assets, track them through the balance sheet until they do hit our account to be capitalized, our advanced reports and audit readiness, and then our build-up functionality. So I'll show that in our demo here as we jump into NetSuite, but that's kind of a very good preview and overview of where we're headed. I don't know, I guess, Jenny, are there any questions that have come through? I know since I'm like sharing my screen, I may have missed something, but just want to pause and see if anyone had any questions up to this point.
I'm not seeing anything as of yet.
Okay, perfect.
But the Q&A section is open. If anybody has any questions, feel free to submit.
Okay, so let me go ahead and re-share my screen with NetSuite here. All right, looks like that should be coming through, but holler if you are not seeing the right screen. So obviously I am within my NetSuite, so this is pretty standard. As mentioned, all of our products are going to sit natively here in our dashboard. So here you can see net asset, net lease. So those will be the two that we're kind of digging in here. But net close, as I mentioned, net cash, etc. So starting with net lease, pretty basic setup here. Each one of our bundles will look very similar as in the way they're set up. So you'll see we have our overview, we have our help, which will link you out to our knowledge base, any release notes, etc. And then we kind of get into the nitty gritty of the setup, implementation land, where Meridian being a certified partner of ours, they would help you kind of through, let's set up your lease types. What do those look like? Is there any custom sourcing or filters that we want to look at? So this will really be in the back end as you're setting up your account. Lease management is where you're going to spend most of your time as an end user. So it's pretty simple to create a lease. Obviously, we can always do this with CSV import. So if you have a lot of leases coming in every month versus just doing a one-off creation, I will do the one-off just because I think it makes a little bit more sense as we're looking how to set up a demo or set up a lease. But obviously, we do not expect you to do this if you have like 5, 10 leases coming in at a time. So it will take us to our lease record here. Pretty simple, where we will just start entering our lease name. And so we'll just say Meridian. In our setup and our implementation, this is where we would start deciding what is our lease type, what does that look like. So we could say, maybe we have a vehicle. This will auto-populate our lease classification. And again, this is all kind of within setup. If for some reason you had a use case where, hey, vehicles are generally operating, but for this, certain situation, it's financing, etc., you can always override that. But I'll leave that as operating here. We do support different subsidiaries. So if I go, and select that, it will drive my currency. Again, we have the option to change that, and we do support native NetSuite's currency FX if that ever comes up. If we want to tag a vendor, we certainly can do that here. We can add a photo, we can add notes. If you aren't seeing, a specific field here that you're like, hey, that'd be really helpful. Sometimes with vehicles, people want like a VIN number that can always be added to this form as well. That's very easy to add. We'll go ahead and have our commencement date. We'll just do it at the beginning of the month. And either we can enter our end date, or per the lease agreement, if we know how many terms it is, that will also drive our end date. So if I were to update this to 20 months, you'll see my end date has now updated. So kind of vice versa, depending on what type of information you have available. Initial lease payment, we'll just throw that in there. And then we have our discount rate. So I know that this is an area that kind of can trip people up a little bit and does get a bit more into like our technical accounting topics. So we try to give you a bit of help here on the field, explaining the guidance, where this is coming from, and how to calculate that discount rate. So I'll just put 2.3% for our example. If we have any prepaid lease payments, initial direct costs, or lease incentives, over here is where you would input those, but that is fully supported. And then that is going to kind of be our basic schedule information. From there, we obviously need to look at, do we have any uplifts? If we do, how frequent are they? And we can support either like dollar threshold uplifts or percentage threshold. So if it's like 2% increase every year, or kind of different use cases like that. So I'm going to say on this date in a year, I am going to have an annual uplift of, let's say, 2%. And so you'll see below, it auto calculates that for me. If I wanted to say, hey, in 2028, it's actually going to go up to 2,500, I can also input that pretty easily. You'll note to the right here, we can also support things like CAM or insurance, utilities, things that maybe aren't going into our ROU asset, but things that we certainly want to be tracking within the system. That's no problem to add there. So once I've input all of my basic information, I'll go ahead and save my lease record. And this is what's going to start driving our lease schedule for us. So we'll see how fast my NetSuite wants to be today. If it's dragging, I can just pull up a pre-existing lease for us to look at, but let's give it a second to think here. One thing I will point out, as it's just kind of loading, we do have a classification tab down here, which is really helpful. Obviously, as we're setting up classifications, ideally, we know that vehicles are always operating, but if we do ever have questions, we can come down to this classification tab and look at what is our criteria. And so this would all be criteria that, if applicable, would flip us to a financing lease. And so this is straight from the codification. Does the lease transfer ownership? Does it grant an option to purchase? If any of these are applicable, then that would kind of be our sign of, hey, we may need to relook at that lease classification. So that's just a nice tool that we've built in into our lease record. So now that I saved this down, you'll notice that I do have that lease schedule built out for me. So we have our start date, our end date, those lease payments as we prescribed them, and then it's going to start breaking out between lease expense, interest, allocation to principal. So all of that kind of heavy lift on the accounting side, and then ultimately leading us into our ROU adjustments and balances. So one thing to point out here, so we are still in pending status. So if we had, anything that we needed to update here, very easy to do that. But once this looks good, I'll go ahead and actually commence my lease, and this will start moving us into where we can start running journal entries and actually have GL impact. So again, we have not posted anything to our journal yet, but that is kind of like the preemptive phase. The reason we have these steps built in is that we like to give opportunity to have internal control. So maybe someone can create a lease, but they can't really post the journals, or they need to post the journals and then someone needs to review. So we have created these steps to allow for those internal controls. Once I go here, I'll go ahead and run my journals, and it will now grab this, and we can post our ROU asset, and then our monthly journals as it follows. So monthly journal processing, again, this is very one-off. I wouldn't expect you to go in every single lease and run your journals each month. So this can be done in bulk. If I go ahead and select all instead of just my initial entry, we should be able to see our commencement entry as well as our monthly amortization entry. So you'll see we have those two entries since this is a new lease. So let's go ahead and generate those transactions. And this, again, is officially posting to this is officially posting our journals to our GL, and we are now making a GL impact at this point. So get those thinking. One thing I like to call out, just as an ex-auditor, I know there's always questions of like, where did this journal go? Where did it come from? Who initiated it? I love how we have kind of thought that through on all of our products. So you'll notice, even as this is processing, I can always note the lease record and where it came from. So if I pop back into here, we'll see that lease record. And what's going to happen once these journals post is we have this journal entry column, and we will actually see the journal entry populate here. And we will have it hyperlinked so we can kind of pop back and forth if at any time we had any questions. Let's go back here and see if it's done thinking. So there we go. We have our entry for our initial balance and our amortization. I'll pop them open, not too interesting, but just so you can see what those entries look like. If it wants to participate, there we go. So as I mentioned, we have now established our ROU asset, or right of use, our lease liability. And so bringing that onto our balance sheet, you can always see where that came from, and we can go back to our lease record. And then on the amortization, similar, we have a lease payable clearing account created for this demo account, and then we'll be hitting our lease expense, liability, and amortization. So that should look pretty familiar if you guys are managing this in Excel or you're using any other tools. These are kind of just those standard entries that you should expect to see. And then if I go back to my lease record, what I really like here, as mentioned, is within our schedule, those entries are now hyperlinked, so I can also always access the journal. So that kind of brings us full circle to creating a lease, running our journals. Once we have commenced the lease, you're going to notice we have a few more options up here on the top row. As mentioned, NetLease as a tool can fully support any modifications. So maybe you have a lease that, you had an option to renew. You weren't sure if you were going to renew it. You're now at the end of the lease and you're like, yeah, moving kind of sounds like a pain in the neck. I am going to renew this lease, but what the heck do I do under 842? This makes it very, very simple. We just hit our modification button, and we would just note kind of what bucket the modification falls under. wow, my internet and NetSuite are running so slow, the beauty of a demo account. But this would take care of that manual effort of like, what is my new calculation? We'd come in here. Standard modification would be kind of that renewal. If we did have, a decrease in scope, maybe we, cut down on our office space by half or whatnot, we can support all of those. Whoops. And then we just enter some basic information of, what was the effective date of that? What's our new lease end date? What's the new terms, which would be driven again by that end date? And then our discount rate. So when you do have a modification, you will have to re-update that discount rate at whatever, the frequency is. And so you would have that opportunity to update that. And then if you did have any changes in your lease payments, you could also take the opportunity to update that here. What that would look like if I did kind of walk through that is this lease schedule would automatically update. We'd have another journal entry that would note that that was a modification. And so we would call that out, and then your ROU assets and everything would kind of be revalued with that modification. So making it really easy. You don't have to rerun it yourself. The system will take care of that. Similar if we had any transfers, if we had to, terminate the lease early, rewind. This is kind of nice. If you make a mistake and that period is still open, we can kind of rewind the lease back to update it. But that is, obviously the periods would need to be open in order to use that. But just some nice options here as you guys are working through your monthly entries. Things I haven't pointed out that probably are good to point out, obviously being native within NetSuite, we have the ability, to support native like documents. If you wanted to throw the lease agreement in here, you could do that. Modifications, had I run that, it would be captured here as part of kind of that audit log for you. And then if you want to track any like renewals, things like that, we do have the option to do that here as well. So kind of full picture here on our lease records. From here, I would point us into our reporting functionality. And so this is going to be obviously another great benefit of using a tool like NetLease or even NetAsset is we have so many reports out of the box. We kind of break them up into GL, subledger, disclosure reports. If I go into my GL here, you'll see we have our roll forward report. So let me go ahead and run that. And then if I go into my subledger reports, this is where you're going to see things like our waterfall report. So all our reports are built out very similarly. You'll see here we kind of have the information. If I pop up these filters, this is where we can start getting a little bit more granular. I can set my accounting period that I want to look at. But what I really value here is how we break up the information. So we have our ROU asset, our accumulated amortization, our lease liability, but then we break it up into lease type. And from there, we take it even a step further where you can look at the lease, the lease type, and then your lease record. So again, X auditor, X closing the books type consultant. I understand the value of making sure you know where everything is going, where it's landing. And so we can see down to the lease record, what was our beginning balance, our additions, any terminations for the month, and bringing us to our ending balance. And this is fully, you can export it to Excel. And so you can save this down as a work paper at the end of the month. And then similar with our waterfall report, let me go in here. This one's a little easier if you just set your dates to like the year. So if I say from January to December and then preview, this is going to show us kind of that full waterfall report of what we would expect to be posting throughout the year. So this is great as we forecast. Also a very common report that folks are probably creating by hand. And then we can drill into those lease types and we can see each one of those leases and what we kind of expect as far as those postings throughout the year. That being said, a ton more reports that I'm probably not going to touch on.